Okay, greetings everyone. I'm Faye Francy and it's a pleasure to be with you today and welcome you to the State of the Industry panel of ASRG's Secure Our Streets conference. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to ASRG for bringing us together in this important forum and to all of you for joining today's discussion. As we look at the current landscape of automotive cybersecurity, one theme stands above all else: collaboration. We cannot advance through the efforts of any single company, research institute, or policymaker. It requires shared commitment across industry, academia, and government. That spirit of collaboration is exactly what ASRG has fostered. Thanks, John. And also what we do in the Auto-ISAC. We've seen firsthand the power of collective knowledge. Each year, our annual automotive threat landscape report synthesizes global threat intelligence, highlighting emerging attack vectors, adversary trends, and the defenses shaping our industry's response. The insights don't come from one organization. They are the product of many experts across a multitude of automotive experts and companies, contributing knowledge to the benefit of all. It's a model of collaboration that helps keep vehicles, infrastructure, and people secure. We know that the other side, they collaborate quite a bit and they have no lawyers or processes. The challenges continue to grow. The rapid adoption of software defined vehicles, increasing connectivity, and the emergence of AI features expand both innovation and attack surfaces. Regulations like INCYDE 155 and 6 and global standards like ISO 21434 give us a common framework, but it's our responsibility to ensure these frameworks are applied consistently and that they evolve alongside technology. That's why this panel is so timely today. We will hear from technical leaders across the industry, representing multiple perspectives, industry, research, and governance, and playing a very pivotal role in shaping the secure mobility of our industry. Their expertise will help us not only understand where we stand today, but also anticipate what lies ahead. Well, without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. First up, Dr. Markus Tischer. Would you please give your background, Markus?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Markus Tschersich from the newborn star Aumovio. As we learned also earlier this morning, that today is our birthday as new company, so the former Continental. At Aumovio, I'm heading the product governance team. So in the past, it was focused on cybersecurity being, let's say, our architects of our cybersecurity management system, and new responsibilities also for more product governance, also in direction of product safety and AI.
Thank you. Terrific background. And now, next up, Professor Dr. Jörn Eichler from Volkswagen.
Thank you very much also for the invitation from my side. And yes, I'm heading the security engineering department at VW brand, and I'm heading also the system security engineering working group in the Freie Universität Berlin. So I have two hats, practically and a little bit more theoretically, and I'm hoping to bring this together also here in this panel. Thanks.
Thank you for joining. And next and last is Professor Dr. Christoph Krauss.
Yeah, thanks, Faye. Like Jörn, I have also two affiliations. The first, I'm a professor at Darmstadt University of Applied Sciences, heading the research group Applied Cybersecurity Darmstadt, where we work a lot on automotive security. And in addition, I'm the co-founder and head of automotive security research at INCYDE, a company we founded 5 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you. These panelists represent a breadth of expertise needed to address complex challenges of automotive cybersecurity. I'm really looking forward to a rich and thought-provoking discussion. So we'll get right into it. Let's talk about the current state of the union, if you will, in automotive. And let me direct my first question to Professor Dr. Krauss. Publicly reported mobility cyber incidences have hit over 424, and that's up 39% year over year, with 95% executed remotely attacks against the telematics app servers, and that has also jumped from 43% to 66%. So from your perspective, where are we most exposed today? Remote identity, iPaaS, telematics, cloud, or supplier components, and why?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and part of it has been partly answered, I think, in the keynote by Matthias Dehm in the morning, and you already answered it as well, that the remote exploits and API attacks are on the rise, and they are the most real-world incidents have been in this area. So we have exposed APIs, mobile apps that let attackers unlock cars, track cars. We have weak authentication in telematics backends. We have hard-coded keys in apps. So this is basically the most critical attack points we currently have in the real world, and we have some centralized exposure. So we have a single backend flaw which can compromise millions of vehicles simultaneously, and the attackers can operate remotely with low cost, no physical access, and they can gain a lot. So this is why we have, of course, this, I think, at the main attack point currently. This will also change. We have other areas as well. We have supplier components where we have also some medium to high exposure. This lower manifest, but we have all this supply chain risk. This is significant, but I think it's something like a ticking time bomb. Yeah, it's hard to exploit at scale currently, but if you have access to some firmware software distribution channels, then we have a big problem, because 70 to 90% of the software from a car is usually from a supplier. So this is a high impact vector if it is exploited, and we need to, of course, address it. Another point, of course, we have now the infrastructure. We have electric cars, we need charging station, road light units, and this is an rapidly emerging growing risk. Yeah, right now charging stations are often poorly secured. We had presentations at the Chaos Communication Congress a couple of years ago. I think we had today this Pi Buster attack on also very interesting talk. So they are here, but the scaling is currently not so high as some telematics exploits, but they are on the rise. So as EV penetration and smart grid interaction, control the energy based on the required energy, you control the charging energy. So this can become as exposed as telematics today. And lastly, of course, we have the cars. Yeah, we have all the attack surface. We know this. We had a lot of presentations today, GPEG and so on, with wireless interfaces, and we all need to address all of these 4 areas.
Excellent. Thank you for that long answer. Very supportive of the challenges that we're facing in the industry. Is there any of the other 2 panelists like to comment?
I guess we will come back to that later, but I guess perhaps we come back later.
Okay.
Will be,
All right.
as you mentioned so many things, Christoph.
Yeah, he did. He mentioned quite a few. All right, very good. So let's go on to the next question, and let me ask Professor Dr. Jörn Eichler, from an industry perspective, the state and the motivation of what's happening there. We've seen massive scale incidences triple, privacy data impact also, and we're talking about at least 60% of the cases that we've seen really increase. Globally, ransomware remains a leading threat, as we all know, with adversary breakout times dropping to under an hour now. When you look at those trends, how do you measure the current state of the automotive cybersecurity industry, and particularly from your vantage point? And have the motivations of attackers shifted in ways the industry needs to pay closer attention to?
Thanks for the question first, and perhaps simply Jörn. It eases up addressing me. So the boring part of the answer is, as everybody, I guess, we have 2 sources. We have the external sources that you already cited. So there is communication that is published that we use also for our analysis, as well as the internal sources that we are able to use, and then aggregate both perspectives. And that's then, from my point of view, the interesting thing, because this has been my thought, whether I directly answer Christoph or whether I just wait. I don't think that we have a consistent picture here. For sure, for everything that Christoph said, there is evidence in the field. But on the other hand side, trends and numbers are quite diverse, depending on the source that you're questioning for. And so my perspective is more, that, or perhaps my personal perspective at least, is that we need in the industry more mature levels of measurements or metrics that we can use and apply consistently to generate a more consistent perspective also for all participants. This is so the foundation of everything from my point of view, that we need consistent perspectives based on numbers that we all share, and that we know how they have been counted, to phrase it in this way. On the other hand, and to answer also the question regarding the cybersecurity state, I just, nevertheless, although there are so many like clouds in the sky, dark clouds in the sky, I see the industry maturing, because we have so much more understanding now. We see the distribution of security activities and all the participants in the supply chain, as well as elsewhere in the ecosystem. So we are not in these initial days where we need to understand what is automotive security in the first place, but we are executing it on a quite professional level. We have regulations in place. So I think we have both sides. We have these numbers that Christoph just cited in the perspective, but we have also quite a structure to work with to cope with this challenges at hand. And to the last part, perhaps to the motivation, whether they shifted or not, of the attackers. First of all, I consider isolated speculations on attacker motivation not as the best foundation for decisions, but especially if you consider the quality of the data. But I guess personally that the follow the money principle is quite persistent in automotive industry, as well as in other cybersecurity industries, as a good guiding principle.
Well, very good. I appreciate the comment you made about the maturity of the industry, and I can say, having been in this industry now 9 years, when I first arrived, it is very different today, and there is a great deal of maturity, and I do believe the OEMs have promulgated some really great external excellence in these areas. Nonetheless, we continue to see these about the effectiveness of some of the regulations. So going over to Dr. Markus, sure. You have done a lot on CSMS. So regulations like R1551, companies are investing heavily in their CMS systems. But the really big question remains, how do we measure that effectiveness? KPIs, are there benchmarks? And is there some success indicators that could give both industry and regulators confidence that CSMS is truly improving resilience?
Yeah. I would say that the most fast forward answer is we see it with the products on the market, how resilient they are against all those threats that also Christoph pointed out here, and what also we have seen the whole day. But at the end, there is no 100% security, and we know it. And especially being in a big organization, we need something to manage our risks, also our opportunities. But we need a system to top down ensure an effective organization in managing our risk, identify them, assess them, and also going for mitigation. And therefore, CSMS I see as a lever in an organization across the supply chain at the end to come to the good products. We have also what you mentioned, the 21444 and the ISO Pass 5112, what is giving us guidance on how this could look like and how to also audit it. And when you ask about KPIs, we can bring it along this idea of a management system. It is about measuring effectiveness by having internal audits and seeing what is the compliance rate we see in different organizational units, different business areas, but also different parts of the product lifecycle. We can think about cybersecurity risk closure rate. That we think about, what can be done there? Which risk do we have identified, and which also really we have in a sustainable way be able to close? At the end, it's all about intrinsic motivation and qualification. We can see what is our cybersecurity awareness in the company and what is the training coverage. Sometimes people are slipping through the system and doing jobs where they're not fully aware about the consequences or fully informed there. And we can talk in terms of incident response and vulnerability management with time to mitigation and so on. I think what is an idea, what is in the IT security quite common about maturity models. We don't have it for automotive at this point in time. We at former Continental, we looked into OWASP as a maturity model for cybersecurity. We found out it's very targeted to IT organization, and maybe we can think about things that can also give us internal tools to measure our own maturity and to find a way to continuously improve by learning more and more on ourselves.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, building that resilience is difficult, and measuring that and understanding that we really are implementing what we need to do to mitigate these threats and manage the risk, to your point. Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum, right? Regulations play an enormous role now in shaping our cybersecurity posture as an industry. And now, as we look at that, we also here in the US have seen something from the Department of Commerce about the connected vehicle rule, I'm sure you're familiar with. And there's emerging frameworks in China, in India, and in South Korea. These requirements are creating both structure and pressure for organizations across the ecosystem. So, with that in mind, let's now turn our discussion to regulatory compliance. And what I would say some of my members call regulatory fatigue. So, regulatory compliance and fatigue questions. Let's get started. I'm going to go to Markus first on managing the complexity of the regulatory environment and harmonization across all of you who are global companies. How do the companies with diverging regulations across regions really manage in a holistic way the harmonization of that? And does regulatory complex ultimately create stronger or weaker products?
So being here at the forefront of my organization for that topic, you unfortunately touching here my nightmares. So it's really getting more and more worse, and where we had a quite luxury situation in the last decades of getting more and more harmonized legal framework. I'm currently seeing that we're going here in a fragmentation. We see that national states building up borders, sometimes claiming it due to security reasons, but there's always a kind of protectionism behind it. And this is started in US, at least on the regulatory scale, but we also know situation in China, in Europe, there's discussion, in Japan, there's discussion, and so on. So therefore, we have this increasing complexity, and there is a situation not just on the global scale. There's also a situation that we are quite have well understanding about our industry specific regulation. You named it, UNR 155. Also with the ISO SAE 2144, we find an effective tool for the supply chain. But due to the more and more increasing importance of cybersecurity, also seen by policymakers, we're getting more and more horizontal regulations. And as industry also already regulated, we're here in the crossing, and we need to see, okay, what comes from the side as an industry agnostic regulation where we are confronted. In Europe, it is especially the Cyber Resilience Act, and here, unfortunately, the devil lies in the details of the interpretation, because in some attempts we are discussing here, and we need to interpret at the end what the regulators want from us. We also face discussion talking to our policymakers where they reply, we are doing the regulation, we are not interpreting them. And this is, of course, a situation where we are a bit struggling, because on the one side, of course, we need to invest when we need to be compliant, no doubt about it. But if we want to do it very targeted on that, what is required from us, then of course we want to start early to prepare. And if guidance coming very late and we need to invest in a very short time, this is of course not positive for us. And overregulation. So we have the UNR 155, where there's reporting duty to the national road authorities. We have the CRA, that requires reporting to ENISA, European Agency for Cybersecurity, and we have the NIS, so the Network Information Security, what is requiring reporting to the national security authorities and agencies. We know we have 27, unfortunately not 28, but kudos to our British friend. We have 27 nations in the European Union, and if you sum it up, one vulnerability, one incident might have to be reported to 55 different entities. In some countries with the mother tongue, so no chance to report in English, having different formats, different, if you are lucky, digital channels. I'm waiting for the German fax to report those things. And this is really bringing so much overhead to us as industry. And if there's something we don't have, beside money, of course, as usually, we also don't have enough cybersecurity experts. Here we are in a big competition with so many other industries. So appreciating Christoph and Jörn's work in getting more security expert on the market, but currently we don't have it. And therefore, I personally and my organization, I'm sure all the others, would like to have the people investing time in making the product strong, making them resilient, working on smart concepts, then doing paperwork in different formats, more or less want to do the same, but in different formats and languages. This is really a point that is not fast forward at this point in time.
Quite a challenge. I mean, that is an awful lot of reporting and challenges that you've just identified. That's a really difficult situation. And I think as we become more and more integrated globally, also this continues to, I think, stress all of us, right, to some level, with all of these different activities. All right. Well, you've got me concerned, Markus. So let's go beyond the checkbox for right now. And Christoph, if I may come back to you. Current regulations really focus very heavily on process and documentation, as we've just heard from Markus. What additional metrics or artifacts could regulators request, like fleet anomaly detection rates, OTA rollback data, supplier attestations, that might drive a real world security improvements? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a quite good question, and I immediately think about a project we had at INCYDE, a typical story we had actually. So we had a project with a small OEM who needs a TARA for a vehicle, and at the first meeting we discussing what the OEM wants and how the TARA is performed and so on. And the first what he said, we just want to pass. We do it as a bare minimum. We just want the checkbox, and that's it. Do nothing more. And so I think it's very important. We need to push the industry forwards, and especially I think these medium to smaller OEMs working on this towards stronger, more evidence-based practices. So regulators could demand some more metrics, artifacts to demonstrate the ongoing resilience, and not just this, well, we need this compliance upfront and that's it, what we currently have. So for this, I think we also need to think about different areas. One point, of course, is when we look at the product, we have something like the supply chain, we have the S-bombs. And when I think about this, I think about a presentation Jörn gave at ESCAR last year or 2 years ago, where Jörn was complaining that the quality of the S-bombs is currently not sufficient. And I think this is something where you could start, that we have something like the S-bomb completeness in percent. So this is what I think this would be, at least for critical ECUs, we need a complete S-bombs 100%. That is something which we could measure and which would help Volkswagen, as an example, since Jörn is here, and make his life, I think, a lot easier. So I think this is something where we need and and also work with the supplier, that we get some feedback, and we do not have some latency on this and so on. I think this is an example for it. What else could we need? We are working a lot on this testing and assurance. So we have our pen testing team working on in this, and very often in our project, this is also, check this based on some risk estimation, just check these ECUs and maybe this percentage of network interface. I think this is also an additional point where we could introduce some metrics where we say, okay, based on the TARA, we have some identified the critical points, and we need to test 100% of them. And then for medium, we need to test, I don't know how much. I think this is something we need. Another point is now what we need to address is more this software update aspect. We are having this with a 156. Yeah. For this, we could also introduce some metrics like the mean time to patch. Yeah, if we have a critical vulnerability with a high CVSS score, we have some requirements, some metrics, how fast they get patched. Yeah, and also something like the patch adoption rate, how many vehicles are patched after 30 days or something like this. Yeah, and I think these are aspects, just 3 examples on this, where we could help the industry and not going beyond this checkbox. We just want to do the minimum, and now they know they have more. Again, it's a little bit what Markus didn't like. We have more regulations. If we have now these matrices also as some regulation, we get even more. But from our experience, I think it would be very helpful to have something like this, that you have not only, yeah, we are compliant, but we have something more you can really do and catch, and you can measure it. And also, I think this would really increase the security of the end product in the end. Now, maybe Jörn can also say something to this point, because especially on this SBOM, I immediately thought about this presentation, which I really liked at ESCA. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, thanks. 2 years ago, and it's still bothering us as everybody else, I guess. And I want to highlight 2 things before I forget it. First, Markus, full alignment. We need to avoid this fragmentation. This is really an industry topic that we need to stress together. And the other thing, yes, for sure, the SBOM stuff. In addition, 2 things perhaps to that. I think quality is king here. So it's not about only completeness in terms of like coverage, because you can cover the SBOM saying, okay, I have a blob. This is the Aumovio blob, and you must not ask further. But we need to define also granularity there. And this is very good. And the other way, perhaps in order to avoid further fragmentation of regulation on the one hand side, but to ease up here, we could align industry-wide on standards how we transfer those things. So it's not about regulation, but it's about how we together decide on which is the good thing to do this job, and that we can measure it together. That nobody, and technically not in a person, that a computer can count whether this is good enough or not. So fully support of your position, Christoph, there. But perhaps not as a regulation, but
Yeah,
an industry standard or something like
industries, something like this. Yeah.
Maybe one addition or feedback to Christoph, so that I'm allowed to talk to policymakers again in future. I think the regulation itself, it's not the problem. Yeah, and I think the UNR 155 was a boost for cybersecurity industry in a very positive way and a meaningful way. And this brings us in a very good position compared to other industries that are really in the first steps in bringing cybersecurity to their products. Yeah, that it was a kind of trend that in every regulation a new chapter for or a section and paragraph for cybersecurity was added. And if you sum it up, it is not meaningful anymore. Yeah, it's not targeted to the things. And this is, I think, the responsibility of the regulators worldwide to see, do meaningful things, try to uniform as much as possible, because otherwise it's a killer for the industry, and the added value for the product or the protection for the society, everything what policy should do, is not given.
Excellent comments here. And we did have a quick question from, we were going to really take the questions at the end, but there's, I guess, a clarification, Christoph, for you about what pen test do you need? OEM, the ones from ISO 21434 was the way that was answered. And I appreciate and I know there's been some pen test issues also from a legal perspective, I've heard.
Yeah.
I think, Markus, you brought that up at one of our recent conferences, where you say, oh, well, you can't pen test necessarily. That's not legal to do, right? So really challenging on how we can really move this. But Jörn, let's go back to you. So let's talk a little bit more. How are the OEMs doing with this fatigue, if I will, from juggling all of these different compliance requirements. So we know that there's the 155 audits, the 156 sums evidence, and now the BIS due diligence. How do you keep people motivated and avoid that compliance fatigue in your team? And how can compliance serve resilience rather than becoming a box checking exercise?
Yeah, good question. Perhaps one of the first things, if you start working for an OEM, perhaps you're a little bit resilient against this fatigue, because we must not forget that automotive industry is highly regulated, not only on cybersecurity, and as such, we need to be experts on managing that. But as I supported also Markus in the perspective, for sure we must avoid further fragmentation and doing the same stuff in different formats for different persons without changing the product at all is really annoying, and for everybody, I guess, very a no-brainer, so to say, that this is not a good idea on how to improve cybersecurity in the field. And getting to the field, perhaps from my point of view at least, it is one of the factors that might become pivotal to that, field events, because real cybersecurity validation is where the rubber hits the road, so where the vehicles are on the road, and then we get the feedback from the field, what did work out cybersecurity wise, what didn't went that well, and to close this kind of loop of doing things before, also heavily regulated for sure, but in a way that changed the product, perhaps in a way that this is improving over time, so that we get better results from the field, that we are getting better feedback also to the individual developer or security engineer or whatever his role or her role is, that she understands, okay, I did this, and because of that, the product changed in a way, or the process changed in a way that we get more capacity on reacting to events, or they didn't even occur, stuff like that. So closing the loop and understanding that my work is really helpful from my point of view is the thing that we need. So self-efficacy, organization-wise, is perhaps one of the key factors. And it also displays then the value of cybersecurity activities to all stakeholders, the investments that we do, also management-wise, and then perhaps also incentives there could help to avoid that you just focus on filling out checkboxes, but doing the right thing for the product and having the good feeling that this really helps in the field.
Thank you. One of the items that have come up in the Auto-ISAC was about S-bombs, going back to Christoph's mention of them. And we struggled, right? So we have a supplier group that came together and said, geez, we get all these forms, again, checkboxing, right? All these forms from the OEMs, and they're always different, right? They're always different. And it's really a struggle because we need to sort of standardize this. And the team came together and built a SBOM information report, which is available on our website if anyone's interested. But I will say that it is not, it's not solved, right? It is a problem, and the OEMs ultimately own, the regulatory evidence that they need to present that. And it does challenge all of us with all of these different complexities. So thanks for giving those perspectives. And it's really clear today to me from listening to all of these experts that we really are in a new era of how do we reshape how we approach cybersecurity, and regulations are really only one part of that picture, right? They're an important part, but I think the challenge has been uh, they're not the only part. So another major force driving change is the evolution of the supply chain. And so supply chain risk, of course. As OEMs rethink their strategies, some pulling software development inside with software-defined vehicle platforms, while others are relying more heavily on external partners. So the responsibility for supply chain really is shifting as well. And we know from some pretty major breaches in the past that we all know about, like the Target, that supply chain matters, right? We owe only as strong as the weakest link in our supply chain. So at the same time, the attack surface is continuing to expand itself, right? And not only from the vehicle, but to the broader ecosystem, from the charging infrastructure to backend services and over the air updates. all of this. So as our maturity grow, tools like vulnerability disclosure programs, pen testing are emerging as critical levers to strengthen the trust among us and among the tiers. So with that, let's in mind, let's take part in the next area of discussion, which is supply chain evolution. Markus, I'd like to come back to you and talk about shifting supply chain strategies. OEMs are moving in different directions, some insourcing, some outsourcing, right? So others are really looking at this very aggressively. How do these strategies influence the responsibilities for security in the supply chain? And how do they enable or hinder cybersecurity practices?
So by representing a tier one, I can only be positive on outsourcing. That's the first thing that I have to say. No, joking aside. Of course, if you have everything in your company, you can very easily top-down define roles, responsibilities, and all those things. Yeah. But on the other side, of course, you're lacking technical experience, innovation on the other side. What, of course, with collaboration partner, what is maybe a classical suppliers, but also joint ventures or whatever. But if you want to combine those different strengths, those different competencies and ideas, then at the end, and this is then about outsourcing, you need to discuss with each other. We and I, I have been active in the 2144. So I'm happy to promote it. There are first tools in this distributed development, in coming to an agreement and defining all those things. At the end, it's about communication. We always try with our customers and our suppliers to get some general agreements. Yeah, so what can be discussed on a general level, and what is necessary to be discussed individually on every project level, so that we can reduce the overhead of discussing those things, but at the end having clarity about those responsibilities. So I think it's not a hidden thing that we will go into the revision of the 21434. Yeah, so you can spend money on it in about 4 to 5 years again, just to promote that. And I think that what is the fair point? What I also receive any critiques that some new ideas of collaboration are not well covered by the 21434. Yeah, this classical OEM tier 1, tier 2 distributed development you find there. But topic like off the shelf, topic like any kind of joint venture, joint management systems, or something like this is not in this document. Or of course you can interpret it in this direction, but it's not that it's in scope or that there's a guarantee what is written in there is reflecting those things. And I think here we can we can be more clear, we can give more guidance that those different types of organizations in new business setups have a guiding principle to orient it with each other, that we have the benefit of outsourcing about this innovation and this changed ideas and good products on the one side, but also having clarity and also a sustainable way of agreeing on security responsibilities. And we all know the pain point comes after SOP, how to do the things when we come into the maintenance phase.
Okay, very good. There's a lot to think about here. And so what triggered in my mind was how do we manage this and the complexity, if you will, of cross ecosystem risk, EV charging, for instance. So Jörn, let me come to you. EV adoption is accelerating. The attack surface now extends well beyond the vehicle to include charging infrastructure and back-end operations. Analysis from some governments have shown that vulnerabilities across EVSE to back-end paths are significant. How should OEMs and suppliers address those cross-ecosystem risks? And who should own the responsibility for that security? Tough one.
Yeah, tough question for sure. I guess perhaps to start the other way around, systematically or conceptually, from my point of view, these cross ecosystems risks are not a new phenomenon. And so conceptually also the ideas on how to tackle security for example, for a system of systems with different stakeholders there, and the influences, the cross influences there, is research-wise analyzed, so at least conceptually for sure, and their concept for those things and parts of that to cover Markus for sure are also reflected from my point of view, at least in the ISO that or ISO SAA as we have it today. Perhaps we can be more precise or detail here one thing or another, but there is not a lack of a general concept from my point of view. But for sure, if we now get this increasing volume of interactions, we need to get more proficient in managing those relationships and the interdependencies between those risks. And I've been astonished, I guess. So the concepts are there, but the tools or helpers to effectively do this together are still perhaps a little bit behind. And so we can perhaps, from my point of view, also here have industry action to align on how to communicate such kind of data, and then tooling in order to represent them in a way that can also reflect all those interdependencies. Because complex-wise, it's not that complex as, for example, the car complexity in its function is. It is, but it reflects for sure complexities that we need to cover also on the risk level. And so I say conceptually we are there. We need better like helpers in the industrialization. But on the responsibility side, there are legal things that are regulated for sure. But as a security expert or like man or person that is already working a couple of times in the cybersecurity, I think that the weakest link does not only apply to technology or suppliers, but also to the users and the operators of system. And as such, we need to together to maintain security in a way that the risk level is acceptable for all of us. And we all need to take this responsibility seriously, address it together. There's not one player that wins the game, but we are all in the same field. We need to play together in order to keep security in an acceptable level from my point of view.
I think cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, to your point. Having said that, I also believe that if I'm at a charging station that is in my Volkswagen and I'm plugging it in and it's not working or something bad happens, I don't know. I'm not calling the EV charging station. I'm calling my Volkswagen dealer, right? So again, it gets to brand, it gets to how we manage in a complex environment, how we manage across this in the system of systems. And the challenge in there is like who manages that, right? That's the challenge that you very well articulated, Jörn. And I think it will continue to challenge us. So let's look at some maturity levers maybe to help us with that. And Christoph, as the supply chain evolves, so does the need for testing and validation, as we've already talked about. So vulnerability disclosure programs and pen testing are really becoming critical levers, in my opinion. From your perspective, though, in both research and industry, how can VDPs and pen testing be scaled and integrated across this complex system of systems, multi-tiered automotive supply chain? It's complex.
Yeah, that's also a tough question, but I think it's a central question. Yeah. Yeah, it's as Markus said, it's much easier if you are under the control, if you are an OEM and you have everything under control. But if you have now this complex system vehicle disclosure programs, and also pen testing, well, it's relatively straightforward if you are alone, if you are the OEM. Yeah, but when you are working with hundreds of suppliers, each with their own processes, varying maturity, this makes it really hard. So the key, I think, is to standardize some expectations. Yeah, you need to share infrastructures and distribute the accountability in a way that it scales in some way. Yeah, so you have to address all the challenges. If you have suppliers want to protect their IP, they want to have fair liability aspect, they have these different processes, and you need to all integrate this in some coordinated vulnerability disclosure program. And how to do this, I think, yeah, maybe we can ask Jörn as an OEM, if the OEM would let something like an umbrella VDP, something like this, to coordinate this all with his suppliers. and all the suppliers need to agree contractually. This is a question for Markus, if they want to do this, that discloses all the affecting of their components will be routed through the OEM as a central VDP platform. I think this is still an open question, and the suppliers and the OEMs need to talk and work together on this. I think this is the aspect on the VDP. Pen testing as well. We have at INCYDE we did pen testing for components only, and then we did a pen test for an entire vehicle, and the vehicle there's a component, the ECU is already included, so it's double pen tested in some way. And this is also something which needs to be addressed via the supply chain. How can we do this and do not spend double the time for doing some pen testing? And for this, we also need something like some standardized test plans, evidence. Maybe we have something like a shared. This is for a research perspective. We're currently also working on some evidence, working with digital twins, for example, and having some cloud-hosted digital twins of ECUs, some containerized firmware images we can use, and this could enable some scalable automated testing without needing some physical access. I think this is now the research perspective of me speaking, because this is something some PhD students are looking into, and I think this would be very interesting also for research perspective, and not tomorrow, but maybe in some near future also to improve all this scalability issues of this different multi-tier supply chain, for example. So these are
Well, thank
some
you.
aspects on this, but I think to address this, we could discuss this, I think, in a session for 1 hour or longer, only on these aspects.
Yes, indeed. No, I appreciate that. The complexity matters, and it does touch us all. I'll just see if Markus or Jörn want to weigh in here.
So OEM first.
Always.
Always.
As I said, the legal things are settled so far in the first place, and the good thing is that we are an open society, so we have different possibilities that we can try out together. What works best. So from my point of view, this is really a feature that there is not one way, and we are restricted to do this that way, but we have opportunities to explore together what works better and how to tackle those like efficiencies, although we have the complexities.
From research to reality, there is some steps there, right? And it is creating more complexity for, of course, the OEMs and the suppliers. Markus?
I think it's like less about the willingness. It is more about practicability.
Yeah.
Because our experience, and then we come back to discussion about responsibilities and so on, we always have to handle the wishes of all our valued customer. And usually they are not having the same opinion. They have other ideas for the same issue. And for us, of course, we have other aspects also with other NDAs and so on. So having everything at the OEM side, less on the on our own side, and managing VDP and so on, would be, from a practical perspective, hard thing to manage. And of course, we can always talk about standardization in this field, but facing reality, at the end, the standard might be too high level as an overall consensus that this is really coming to a level of practicability that we have a uniform approach here.
Very good. Very good. Well, we've really hit the whole landscape here, but as we've explored today, industry continues to face these growing threats, evolving regulations, a shifting supply chain, and cybersecurity is not static either, right? So we have really some complex challenges here. So let's move over to the final part of our discussion. I know I think we have 10 more minutes left, but let's take a look at future outlook, the technologies, tools, and workforce challenges that shape automotive cybersecurity, say, over the next 5 years. Post-quantum cryptography to AI-driven threats and the persistent global skills gap continue to challenge all of us. The horizon is both exciting and yet demanding. So let's talk about that just for a quick minute. And Markus, to you from a technology evolution, post-quantum encryption and cryptology standards are really emerging, and they're really becoming mainstream. What technologies do you see or are that are changing or challenging the automotive security landscape over the next 5 years? And how should OEMs and suppliers prepare for that?
No. So you named already post-quantum. I think this will be a kind of revolutionary step because here some things that are traditional cybersecurity have to be changed. Yeah, we need to prepare products for being also resilient for post-quantum computing. And so we already invested time in it, also in innovation, to understand what does it mean for automotive. And I think this is really something well and worth to invest in to understand it. The second topic that I see is the topic of privacy, of data protection. We have the GDPR already for a longer time in Europe, but the European Commission recognized that it needs more enforcement, so they will make it more and more stronger. And I think at this point in time, automotive industry had been quite successful in not being in the focus of our data protection offices in the States. So the focus had been more on service provider, big tech companies, but I think this will change with time. Yeah, when they have that managed, they will come to us. And previously announced technologies, I think here to prepare on the one hand side to fulfill the legal part, the compliance part, and on the other side to have use cases enabled. It's not just a business thing. Of course, data is money. Today, of course, this is important for us as companies that want to earn money. But on the other side, there are also other use cases like improving safety, what also can rely on data, what would fall under such kind of data protection. And I don't want to stress so much the analogy of the cat and mouse game, but whereas we have the revolution part, we have the evolutionary part. And just to look back, 10 years ago, we talked about theft protection. These are the starting points for cybersecurity, immobilizers. Yeah. Then we talked about manipulation. First of all, odometer was one area, or about manipulation in terms of tuning with powertrains and so on. In the last years, we talked a lot about scammers. What can they do in the vehicles? And since about 3.5 years, especially starting with the war in Ukraine, we see that also states are actors and public agency that wants to threat our societies. And we need to understand that in the threat landscape, we have more powerful things. And you said, yeah, it's not worth to, or you said that, of course, there's a motivation. It's more looking on the money part. In general, I agree to you up to the scammer level, but I think there are also other ideas in mind, unfortunately, by attackers, especially when it comes for states that want to threaten a society, that want to threaten other states. And it's not that the automotive is in the viewpoint, but we are one part of potential threat scenarios such kind of state and public agency can use to drive their ideas and to drive what they want to attack. What at the end is the freedom of our society. And I think here we as an industry, we have also responsibility. Yeah, we always had responsibility when it comes to safety, yeah, to save the life and the wealth of the people and the passengers in the vehicle and around. And in this consequence, also here, we have to look also on the resilience in this more and more complex threat landscape.
That's very helpful, Markus. I mean, it really brings to the forefront the dramatic changes that are going on in automotive industry. I would say it's like akin to the Industrial Revolution. We're having so many changes in an amazing way, right? And that brings better life to all of us. But there are a lot of challenges and kinks to work out. And then we talk about AI. So let's go over there. That's a tough topic, but Christoph, if you can help us, AI is being applied both offensively and defensively in automotive cybersecurity. What AI use cases are you seeing right now that are in the industry And are these more defensive applications like fleet anomaly detection or supplier risk scoring that have moved the needle? And which AI-driven threats this year force teams to adapt different processes?
Yeah, that's also a very good question because we have these two aspects of AI. It can be used for the good or the bad. For the bad, we have, well, the problems we have also in the regular IT systems, and we already discussed that the backend systems are a viable target. So we have AI-powered ransomware, social engineering, for example, phishing with tailored deep fakes. What we got now all in the news, it's also affecting the industry in the automotive industry. I think this is a huge problem we have, especially for all these backend systems. But I look more on the positive aspect, and this is also where, from my research perspective, we are looking in how can we use AI to improve security. Yeah, so I think this is what you see. You have already the large language models which you can use to do some programming. They are doing an incredible job. This can also help to improve the security of the code. Yeah, I think this is something we should not, and I hope this will also improve. The same is for doing pen testing, yeah, or red teaming. You can do some attacker simulation with AI. This also helps to improve the security. You can automate vulnerability scanning and so on. You can use AI to do some threat intelligence trends, and you also get this back in your security operations center to react more efficiently and faster to threats. You have what you just mentioned, this real-time anomaly detection and predictive threat monitoring. And I think this is very interesting to do this. And there's also a lot of potential for doing real research. Yeah? So speaking the research part of myself and what we're working on, currently we're working on improving formal security proofs, which are really cumbersome and really intensive with AI, so that we can show a protocol is secure, but we do not need a couple of weeks to do the formal proof and help or support these formal proofs with AI, for example. So I think AI can help a lot. And of course, we have all the drawbacks, what we just mentioned, but we need to do the best of it.
Yep. Very good. We are almost out of time, so I do want to get Jörn in here. And Jörn, there's an awful lot going on, and looking forward, one of the elements that we have not discussed that really is a really critical part of cybersecurity is the human element, right? How do we manage a global cybersecurity workforce, integrated in training programs? What are your final thoughts on how we approach that?
So very briefly, I guess there is no silver bullet, and as such, as we see the different demands and the frequency of their changes, we need to be able to adapt. That's the core thing, and we need to be able to adapt as an organization, and we need to be able to adapt in the individuals, so that everybody is able to learn further how things are working, how he can help or she can help better, and the organization to adapt to the challenges at hand, and then address them directly. So there will not be that concept to scale whatever framework we need for cybersecurity. That is then once and for all. So this would be, from my point, a short answer. And perhaps one side note.
Please.
Um, there is also perhaps a thing of reducing the noise in the signal, because I see a lot of things that are pseudo innovations, that new names for all things. And if we reduce the number of those, and I see the need for awareness for new things, but in order to keep the awareness level high, but if we know that we are talking about stuff that perhaps also happened 20 years ago in another format for sure, but conceptually wise the same, and could be also addressed security wise the same, we would reduce a lot of like ways around that do not lead directly to a good solution from my point of view.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm going to wrap it up. We have incredible group of technical experts here that have really shared an incredible journey with us today, from challenges to solutions, and I greatly appreciate it. It's been a real privilege to be here with you today, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your engagement and making those conversations so meaningful. And thanks to the speaker, to the audience that have collaborated as well. I'm sorry we didn't get too many questions from the audience, but we will look at those and work with you if you have some questions. But remember, it's about value of continuous learning, understanding each other, and keep the collaboration and talking open. Thanks, everyone. Again, greatly appreciate to our 3 panelists. Thank you so very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.